I would just like to first say, on Friday, I came to know that Peter Ciano passed away on Thursday. And he was a tremendous human being who helped us out here at the on the planning board, and he surely will be missed. So I just want to have a moment of silence before we start the meeting. Okay. Call to order the regular meeting, August 22nd, 2022. Township of Ocean Planning Board. Can we have a roll call, Amy?
Here. 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 Here.
Here. Salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meeting Law for this meeting has been satisfied. A copy of the notice has been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk on July 26, 2022. Emergency notice. We don't have that on Zoom. There's an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. We also don't have no smoking on Zoom. All these additional stuff.
Bogs it down.
Board policy. No new cases will be started after 10:30 p.m. and no new testimony taken after 11 p.m. All meetings will be video and audio tape as shown on the Township of Ocean Community Cable Channel, Channel 22, Verizon, Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you need to make a call, please make a call outside the meeting room. Okay, resolution and memorialization. Krosny, Berg, Talansky, and Turtel. Block 216, lot 11, 3333 Fairmount Avenue, Ocean, site plan approval. I make a motion to memorialize. Can I get a second?
Second.
Amy?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yes. All right. Next resolution memorialization is Peter Wolf, Block 113, Lot 4, 68 Deal Lake Point Road, Ocean, minor subdivision approval. Make a motion to resolute.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Amy? Wow.
I got a little.
Yes.
I got a chill.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Cases carried to October 24th, 2022. Alessandro Nascimento, Block 17.01, Lot 8, 107 Adams Avenue, Ocean, R-4. New cases. Deal 35 Land LLC, Block 33, Lot 19.02, 1603 Highway 35, Ocean, Zone C7. This is an amended site plan to modify the proposed building C to be a 2-story building with 75 square foot of retail on the ground floor and 79 square foot of office space on the second floor. Ms. Krimko, welcome.
Good evening, Dr. Chair, members of the board, Jennifer Krimko from Ansel Gorman Aaron, here on behalf of the applicant. I was hoping this was an amended site plan. Unfortunately, Jim is an eagle eye and realized that we didn't meet the definition of amended per se. It's actually an amendment to, and it's a preliminary and final major site plan, which is why we did provide notice. As the board may remember, or some of you have been hoping to forget, but may remember, this application originally was for a much larger parcel this board granted a minor subdivision as part of that development for the mixed use. On the eastern lot, it's proposed to have townhomes, and on the western lot, it's proposed to have a mix of commercial uses. The subdivision has been perfected. The proposed lot that we're before you tonight is now a standalone lot, and it's cut off where 1902 is lot 1902. Lot 1903, the residential lot, has been sold to the residential developer and is no longer part of what you are looking at tonight. By way of clarification, since we do have an easement over adjacent lot 19.03, while it's not part of our application, we did include it in our public notice, and the lots within 200 feet of that as required by law. So before I get started, I just ask Mark to confirm that the notice is acceptable and that the board has jurisdiction.
The notice was good, and if I can mark in the following exhibits that I have. Exhibit A1 will be the preliminary and final major site plan, revised through July 5th, 2022. Exhibit A2 will be the architectural plans dated May 4th, 2022. Exhibit B1, as in Board 1, will be the board engineer's report dated July 15th, 2022. Exhibit B2 will be the board planner's report dated August 16th, 2022.
And I don't have anything further in addition to that. And very simply, what we're here for tonight, we're not proposing any site changes at all. What we are proposing is to add a second floor to what we have termed on the plans as Building C, and that would serve to be additional offices on site. Many of you are familiar with Maurice Zakaria, who's sitting behind me. He's the developer of this lot. He seeks to move his office into Ocean Township, considering that he lives here and does so much work here. So the plans before you are for that. There were some questions raised in Ben's and Bill's. Ben, I apologized in advance for doing that. Ben's, and at a pre-meeting, I said I've been saying Jim and Bill for so long that it slips out. That we can easily address, and I think to your satisfaction. So I don't have anything new to submit. I would introduce Mike Gallagher. He has testified before you at the last two amended hearings. I'd have him sworn for this since it's a new hearing.
Okay, so
Mr. Gallagher, do you swear any testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And while I have the moment, let me just swear in our two professionals. Do they swear any testimony they're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help them?
I do.
I do. Thank you both.
why don't we have our professionals go over their reports and find out about these questions, and then we'll
Great.
try and figure out where we at after
Right.
that.
It's been so long, I forgot.
Now, I'll summarize. As was mentioned, they're proposing a second story on an existing approved retail building that will have 6,276 square feet of general and professional office in it. There's no changes to the site layout at all that I'm aware of. The questions I had dealt with the parking requirements. There's a chart on the plans, and one of them deals with the parking requirement for the hotel. And Ms. Krimko and I had a discussion about that, and apparently that calculation is correct, assuming that there are 20 employees on shift at maximum shift. Then that would be correct. And there was some confusion as to the parking requirement for the automotive gasoline station, which the ordinance has one requirement for automotive gasoline station C-stores, but then in the C7 section of the ordinance, there is a specific requirement that is different for any such facility on this site. So I think at the end, the parking is going to wind up, it's going to be a wash, it's going to be pretty close to the same, but we just need testimony so that we can confirm that there is no additional parking required above and beyond what the ordinance would otherwise require. It doesn't look like there is. It looks like there is no variance for number of parking spaces.
They're adding 5,500 square feet of
62 something square feet of office, yes.
62, now it's 62? 'Cause
Yes.
I read
Yeah.
55.
Oh, okay,
No, it's 6276, right?
Correct.
yes.
There was an original application, and then an amendment was submitted.
All right, so I just read 5579. You telling me this is incorrect?
Yes, that's
Yes.
what I'm telling you, but I didn't prepare that.
Mr. Chairman, I think I can clarify that 5579 was from my report from July 15th, and that was prior to the most recent amendment to the application. And the most recent amendment didn't change my report, so a new report was not generated. But that's where the difference is.
Okay.
Okay, and basically there's still, by my calculations, a surplus of at least 30 parking spaces on the site. But I think Mr. Gallagher can confirm those exact numbers. So there is no variance for parking.
So even though we're adding 6,200 square foot to this property,
Yeah.
they're still in,
Within the ordinance requirement for parking, yes. They were very much overparked.
Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a lot of the same things that Jim noted. My calculations were that the site requires 392 spaces and 434 parking spaces are proposed. So with the prior approval, there's still sufficient parking for what they're proposing. The only thing I noted was that it looked like the Building C now requires, if you just look at Building C, it would require 66 parking stalls, and 64 were located in the immediate parking lot adjacent to Building C. So that was just something that I noted that Mr. Gallagher may want to touch on.
Yeah, and that may be something that when we get into redoing the zoning ordinance, we may want to look at having a proximity requirement for parking, because the way the ordinance reads right now, if the amount of parking is on the site, then there's no variance, and the board really doesn't have jurisdiction to change it around. But
so
it's,
what you're
again, it's
saying is
a
there's
minor.
shared parking
Yes. What?
on the site.
Yes.
That's why they're
Yeah.
able to get by.
Yeah, that's
No.
the other thing.
Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the ordinance doesn't have any requirement that the parking spaces have to be within a certain distance of the building for which they service.
Right, well,
Right.
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
they're using
yes,
shared
yeah,
parking.
shared parking,
No,
yeah, that's not a way.
Not in the context of shared parking in the ordinance. We have to be careful.
But there is,
I'm just
but at the
asking
same time,
Mr. Higgins to
with the mix
clarify.
of uses on the site, there is shared parking within the context of shared parking in the
So,
ordinance also.
But not that we relied on
No.
for our parking
No.
requirements. So if I can just address that, because I
No.
think there's a legal distinction here. Your shared parking allows you to reduce the number of parking spaces you're providing when you have multiple uses that share the lot and have different peak times. We are not doing that. We are providing the correct number of parking as if each of these uses were independent. They all happen to be in one shared parking lot, but we're not relying on shared parking to meet our requirements. So we need no variances as it relates to parking for this property. And I misspoke because Mike did not send me an exhibit before coming, so I didn't know we had an additional exhibit until right now when he presented it to everybody. So A3 will be a color rendered version of the site plan. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically a close-up of the area where the office is going.
Okay,
The
of a
building C
portion.
area.
And what's the date on that, Mike?
It's today's date.
And you'll email me a copy of that as well as Amy, so she doesn't have to keep the big board.
Certainly, I also have reduced size. if
Great,
anybody
why
wants.
don't you hand those out? Including to me. Yeah, why don't you give those to Amy? Keep one for me.
You can pass it down if you want.
Nice job.
Okay, so Mike, just to walk through. Are we good?
I got my copy.
Okay, just want to make sure. So Mike, just to walk through a few things. Jim had referenced the hotel requirements, and under the general ordinances, the hotel requirements is 1 space per room plus 1 space per employee at the maximum shift, plus additional requirements in the general. What would that be? That's for restaurants or cocktail lounges or conference rooms, correct?
Medium, yeah.
Okay, and at the original hearing, there was testimony that this hotel is providing conference rooms as a convenience to their guests. It's not open to the public.
That's correct.
And there is no restaurant open to the public. It's a restaurant that's for use by the hotel guests only.
That's
I
also
assume.
correct.
But, so, in your opinion, those provisions don't apply because they don't generate more parking, it's to,
That's correct. It's already serving the customer base that's in the hotel.
and the testimony conservatively originally was that we would have a maximum of 20 employees. We have since, have a revised, more realistic number, and that is how many?
Yes, so the hotel will have approximately 20 total employees. During the max shift, they'll have about 12.
Okay. So even assuming that that ordinance applied, based on the 1 per room and the 12 employees and the conference room space that's there, in the most conservative interpretation, how many spots would we need?
That would be 136.
Okay. And the fast food restaurant, there was a miscalculation. You used
The
a
convenience store.
convenience store, I'm sorry.
Yes.
In the convenience store, you used the more conservative 1 per 300.
1 per 200. So
You used the more
yes.
conservative 1 per 300, but
Amy.
forgot that it's
Amy.
actually one,
A pen, an extra pen.
that it's actually the 1 per 250 plus employees,
No,
correct?
no.
No, it's the other way around.
no.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we inadvertently calculated based on 1 per 250 when it's actually 1 per
Okay.
300.
That's 1
Which
per
equates to
350.
fewer
I think it's 1 per 350.
I actually have the ordinance. It's 1 per 300.
Really? Okay.
But assuming the worst case scenario,
Yes, 1 per 300.
in the.
Section 6.
Okay, so based on that reading, how many spaces do we need for the convenience?
So at 1 per 300 at 5,585 square feet plus 8 employees, it would be a total of 27 spaces.
So 136 for the hotel and 27 for the auto gas. So it's an additional 4 for the gas, an additional 8.
Can I interrupt you
Sure.
for a second? So I like what you're doing, but can you go on the map and show me where these parking spots are when you go through the discussion, so we can follow with the map too, so we know which buildings are which,
Sure.
so everybody knows, it's clear.
Okay, and
Okay.
just one thing, we're not there yet. We're just
Okay.
talking about what the requirement is,
Okay,
not what's actually out there.
all right, I just figured you would do it at the
But
same
I mean,
time.
I'm happy to get
Okay.
involved.
Here, this is A1. So we submitted site.
So the hotel is here,
Correct.
and this requires how many spots?
136.
Okay, and this here is the Chick-fil-A,
Correct.
and that requires how many spots?
38.
Okay, so together, on the north side of the entrance road A, how many spots do they cumulatively
Cumulatively.
need together?
They would be required 174 spaces
Okay,
combined.
and these lots together, how many are here?
176.
Okay, so we exceed the number of parking required for the uses to the north of the entrance drive.
Correct.
Okay, and with regard to the convenience store, you'd indicated how many spots are required out of the
27.
Okay, and just in the area around the convenience store, how many spots are
There's
there?
50 there.
Okay, so we more than exceed that. With
So
rego-
you have 50 where? Show me where the 50 is. That,
Here, 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 and here.
on this drawing here, it doesn't show parking around the convenience store. It just shows it on the outside. So is that different than this?
These parking spaces not shown on your color rendering.
The plan shows a total of 26 spaces around the convenience store.
Okay.
The rendering, the coloring of the rendering with the white spaces and the white concrete, they're not showing up. There is intended to be parking around the
So there's a
Wawa.
mistake on the color rendering. They should have the lines, and they don't.
Correct.
I'm just
Good call, Doctor.
eagle
I
eye.
didn't get a chance to examine it yet.
Yes,
as
it's a
we
new,
know. So between the spaces around the building and around the perimeter, there are 50 spaces?
Correct.
Okay. The office building requires how many spaces?
So in total, as Mr. Matlack had mentioned, it's required 66 spaces.
Okay, and how many are in this immediate area here?
64.
Okay, and then just across the aisle, but where there is a crosswalk and a sidewalk, how many are here?
There's another. That's a bank of 8 here and 4 here.
So even in an ordinance where they did require general vicinity, even though they don't, we would still meet that in that they're all in the general vicinity.
So, can I stop you again?
Sure.
So the building that you're proposing, so now it's almost 14,000 square feet? Are we talking about, right? Is that correct? It only requires 64 spots?
66.
66 spots? Which they only have 64.
No, we only have 64 in this lot here, but we have the additional spots here and here. This is not subdivided, this is one parcel.
You only have 64 in front of the building, correct?
We only have 64 immediately to the west of the building, correct.
Okay.
There's another 12 immediately to the south of the building.
Okay.
So again,
But that also services that other building.
not necessarily. So the number of spaces is a requirement of the ordinance, so.
You don't have, it's okay. I'm not saying that it triggers a variance. I'm just asking specifically, if I'm going to that building right there, I'm gonna use that. I'm not gonna go across that road and go over here by this other building. All those parking spots will probably be filled.
So again, I was getting to that.
All right, go ahead.
So again, you have all that. Now let's go to the proposed retail building here, 3,252. How many parking spaces is required for that?
So I actually didn't break out that specific building, but I did the 3 buildings to
Okay.
the south of Building C would require a total of 129 spaces, and there's a total of 144 spaces in that general vicinity.
So there's should these 12 spaces be needed for the office and were they used, all the spaces proximate to the 2 restaurants and the retail have more than what's required.
Correct.
We were getting there, I just didn't get there yet. So I think that addresses the concern that you had.
Not really, but that's okay. I have a different take on the situation.
So with regard to overall site-wide, what is the required number, in the most conservative?
Yep.
Assuming that the hotel applies, that hotel provision applies even though it was determined it didn't.
So the total commercial parking in that worst case scenario required is 402 total spaces, and we provide a total of 434.
Okay, and when you say 402 required, I think that you're including the restaurant as, was that including the restaurant within?
Yes, that includes, like I said, the worst case scenario, so that includes that meeting room space in the hotel and the dining space in the hotel.
However, the previous approval was approved for only 134 spaces.
Correct.
So worst case scenario, 402 are required site-wide, and we have how many?
434.
Okay, so we have an excess 32 spaces sprinkled throughout the lot.
Yes.
Can you break down, we're talking about building C is the building, right? Can you break out what the ordinance requirement is for each of the spaces and for their usage? Please, so we have retail on the bottom. It requires so
It's
many.
1 per 200,
One-
and office is also 1 per 200, so it's,
So it's all 1 for 200.
Yeah.
So there's no stipulation as to the use on the second floor.
no.
No, that it,
No.
yes,
Well,
that
so-
it's office.
yeah, it's required to be office.
And what does office mean?
As
What are the permitted uses for office?
General and professional offices. No medical office.
A medical office,
No medical
right?
office, yeah.
So it can only be,
General, yeah, the way the ordinance is structured, only general and professional offices are permitted in this development. So if they were gonna go for medical offices, they'd have to go to the zoning board. It's not permitted.
sure can.
So I'm a little curious. So you did one of these things where you took the aggregate number of spaces, right? And then you have just 34 more, some number like that. Right? So I guess just from a common sense standpoint, right? If you're in this building, all the spaces are taken, and there's a space 50 yards away, right? That person is expected to park in that space and then walk all the way across to the office building, right? Is that the...
Well, let me,
Well, look, let me just...
oh, I thought you asked a question, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I'm not finished with that. I'm
Okay.
not finished. So I guess, is there anything related to the proximity of the actual building that's part of the, that gives any restriction here, or is it just the aggregate and the number of folks? Okay.
So
Yeah,
I was just waiting for Dr. DeBenedetto.
but you understand.
I do, and I'm prepared to, I'm
Common
prepared,
sense standpoint.
I'm
that's
prepared to answer it. I just want to make sure everybody's with me.
So if it's 14,000 square foot, right? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Finish his question.
Yes, so to answer your question, we didn't take the aggregate, your ordinance takes the aggregate. So when you say, well, we took the aggregate and common sense says this, your ordinance has a requirement, and we're fulfilling that requirement. There is, as you heard Jim say, there is no proximity to that. But when you also say that all the spaces are going to be filled, I think what you're failing to take into consideration is a couple of things. The requirement for 64 or 66 for this office building and the retail includes everyone, employees, visitors, everything. So to the extent that if I'm owning the office building, I tell my employees for the retail and my employees for the office that they're required to park in these spots because we want the closest spots open for the people visiting us. I mean, that would make the most sense from a common sense standpoint, just from practical application. But what you're also failing to consider is that with the mix of uses here, there's not always going to be a one-stop shop. It may be that someone parks here because they're going to go to Wawa and know that they have to go to the office building. They're not going to, it's like when you go to the Home Depot in West Long Branch. I'll go to Dick's, I'll go to the pet store, and I'll go to Home Depot. I don't move my car each time I do. I park in the centralized area, and then I walk along the sidewalks where it is. So, again, we're simply complying with your ordinance in its entirety. And from a practical standpoint, and I think that's fair, my suggestion would be that if this lot appears to get full, that the owner should have that park there. With regard to the office question, there's 14,000 square feet of office.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's 1 to 200, if it's 14,000, 70 spaces.
No.
That's my math.
It-
You said 66.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that,
Yeah.
I apologize, with the revised building footprint of the office space, 6276, my calculation is 69 for that building C required, 38 for the 7573 retail, and 31 for the 6276 office. So that would be 69 total, and 64 being provided, but as they explained, there are spaces across that access road
You don't
that are
have to say
available.
anymore. I mean, my own personal feeling is that when we designed this project, it wasn't meant to be a max out project. So I feel like coming back again to ask for another 6,000 square feet is like, even though it's within the ordinance, I get it. It just feels like, a slap in the face. You came here a couple months ago and wanted to change the buildings. We granted that. We altered some stuff for you. I just don't, it doesn't feel right. And I don't understand why an office needs to be 6,200 square feet. I mean, my dental practice, yoga studio, and ample space is 5,000 square feet. 6,200 square feet is a big spot for his office. I don't see how that
Well,
kind of plays.
to address
sense.
that it feels like a slap in the face, certainly it was not intended that way, and no appearance that is made before this board is intended to personally offend any member of the board. So let's start there. Secondly, when we came for the swap of the buildings, we were under contractual requirements in order to get that done by a certain amount of time for the prospective tenants. At the time we came for those changes, the plans for the office were not complete. Trust me, if we could have included them as one application and only returned once, not only would you guys have been happy, Ron would have been thrilled, and I would have been happy because it would have already been handled. So this isn't us trying to shove as much as we possibly can into a site. We have an ordinance that governs us. It allows a certain amount of use, and we're not seeking any variance relief. So to the extent that you don't understand why we need so much space, okay. But when you look at what the job is of the planning board in applying the ordinances and ensuring that there's compliance with the site plan requirements, we're in full compliance with your site plan requirements, and we're in full compliance with the ordinance.
But it's not
Just-
always
just-
about,
just to-
if I can say that, it's not always about variances. You know, if the board can look at the site plan aspect of it and see whether this makes sense from a site plan perspective to have parking where people are going to have to cross an access road. And that's something that the board can consider when talking about whether this is good planning for the site itself, which is why we're here. We're here for the site. We're not here for variances. So the fact that they may need more parking spaces isn't the issue. The issue is where are the parking spaces associated with this building going to be and whether that makes sense from a site plan perspective. And that is something the board can address.
They can address it to the extent that it impacts safe circulation of the site. The case law is abundantly clear that when you meet the site plan requirements, the board cannot arbitrarily impose restrictions. Now, when you look at the site plan, we have ensured safe internal circulation, both for vehicles and for pedestrians, because the area we're talking about for the extra 5 cars for the office retail where the employees would park is not an access drive per se. It's not the main access drive. It's not a road. It's just a simple circulation way, but there is a crosswalk. It is signed. That was all taken care of in the first instance. It was always contemplated people would walk there, which is why this board required us to install the crosswalk and to install the sidewalk.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I was not here for the original application. Is it a condition of the approval of the original application that the employees are going to have to park somewhere else? Because you keep saying that the employees are going to
no.
park.
No,
on
no, no.
another
What I,
sector of
what
the
I,
parking lot.
no, what I had indicated was that it would make sense as the owner. If, and since we offered it, if this board were to require as a condition of approval that we label those spots as for employees of that building C, that's something that we could agree to.
Could you show us where those spots are specifically?
I'll just hold it.
And I don't know if the board wants this or not, but if that's what the offer is,
This is
please.
building C. This is the 64 spots,
Right.
all immediately in front of it. And they'd have to walk over an aisle just like anywhere else would have to walk over an aisle. And there's 4 spots here and 8 spots here. It's connected by sidewalk system, a crosswalk, and sidewalk system.
And you want to put you're suggesting if the board wants it, that the parking would be,
Those are the spots.
It could either
Those
be
8 spots.
these 8 spots or these 4 spots. We only need 5.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's something the
but-
board's interested in or not. I'm
But-
just throwing that out there.
I think,
I didn't appreciate how you felt we were being flippant asking the question. We say he uses,
Yeah.
you know, if it's common sense, you know.
I never said, Mr. Weinstein.
It just came across.
Well,
like
I
that.
apologize. I never said flippant, nor did I say it
I mean, you didn't say it,
was.
but it just came across that way. Like, you know, I've seen where people have, you know, kind of had those spaces kind of like dedicated to certain people and certain companies and those kind of things. And that was never detailed here. It was basically said if common sense made it.
Right.
Right.
But, and we don't see the need for it, but if the board sees the need for it, it's something that the applicant could agree to, is all I'm saying.
Can I ask you, if those spaces are dedicated to the office space, does that hurt the retail building?
No.
So you don't need those spaces for retail?
No, because that entire area serves the restaurant, the retail, all
Okay.
of it.
All right, that's fine.
If I could, there's also, it's important to remember, in that area, the restaurant and retail area, there's also offsetting peaks. Like, for instance, the Miller's Ale House doesn't open until 11, and the Turning Point closes at 2.
yeah.
So,
That was the point I was making earlier about shared parking. While not in the ordinance definition of shared parking, There's going to be there's a number of different uses. They're going to be open at different times. So you're never going to have the maximum parking requirement at any one time for all those uses. And the other thing is, quite frankly, it's a 5-space differential between what that building requires and what's provided in front of the building. And that's assuming that every person that goes to that building is only going to that building to use something in that building. And realistically, you've got other retail uses on the site, you've got restaurants, and people are going to be coming, they're going to park somewhere on the site. They may go to Miller's Ale House for a meal, then go over to the retail or to the offices, and so on. So, while not, I would even say not even the majority of the people using that building C would be going to someplace else on the site, I would say a substantial number of people would be. And that would negate that 5-space differential.
Can I just change the topic? I want to go back to the size of the building and all that kind of stuff. So when this becomes a 1-story to a 2-story building, right? How does that impact the people who bought these townhomes over here? And what is that? How does that kind of change the whole flavor of this place? Because as Dr. DeBenedetto was saying, it kind of had a certain feel to this, right? I think even during the hearings and the discussion, one of the things that bothered us was the size of this Marriott and how big it was and all this kind of stuff. So we were trying to keep everything fairly low-keyed here as best as we could, and the builder, the planner worked with us on that. So how much does adding an extra floor kind of disrupt that whole?
Okay, well, what I can tell you, the first thing is that none of these units have been sold yet. They can't be because they haven't recorded their master deed, they haven't registered with the DCA. So the Lennar, who was developing this, was on notice of this hearing and knows that we're here. So essentially, there's no surprise. It's not as if someone bought one of these and says, wow, now all of a sudden there's 2 stories instead of 1. But to answer the question, what's the height of the building as proposed?
34 feet.
So we're 34 feet, so we're actually less in height than what a single-family home would be permitted to be there. Just to put it in context.
I got a couple questions, Mr. Chair. How many employees are we talking about, roughly, and will be working in that building?
We don't have a user for the retail, so I can't answer.
No, I meant for the office space.
What? 10 to 20.
Okay. These are people who are going to be there 9 to 5?
Can I have Maurice sworn in?
Sure.
And you can ask him rather than me answering?
Hi.
Do you swear or affirm that that you'll testify to the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, self?
Yes.
Okay, and just state your name for the record.
Maurice Zakaria.
Thank you. Spell the last name.
Zekaria.
Thank you.
And Maurice, you're the principal of the entity that owns the subject property, and the office on the second floor of the retail building C is proposed for your use.
Yes.
Okay. So,
All right, so
sorry
we're talking about 10 to 20 employees. These are people who are, I assume, full-time, office clerical type things.
Yes.
Not to get too in-depth in your operation, but, how often are you having conferences there? How many times are people coming and going? Just generally speaking.
It's really just a satellite office. Our main office is still in Lakewood. So it's really just having some local people who live close by have a second place to be. So they won't even be there every day. But we don't want to limit the use of the space and have to come back if anything changes. But as of right now, that's the way it is.
All right, so, obviously, something in your favor, you're a local guy, you're going to look at this place, you're going to keep your offices here. It also gives you an incentive to make sure that the place is maintained and all that sort, which is just an assumption anyway. But I just wanted to get a feel for the type of operations you had. This question is not for Maurice. I'm going to go on to a second question.
Just if I can, you might kill me, but just to clarify, so like Jennifer said several months ago, this second floor was part of our plan. So we wanted to come back. We thought it was a permitted use that didn't require to come back, and that's why it wasn't on the plan. It wasn't fully designed. So it wasn't to be a slap in the face or be disrespectful in any way.
Now, this is a question for our experts here. Is this something that we can limit to his operation, or can Maurice say, hey, I'm out of here next week and I'm gonna have another?
You can't limit it to his operations. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not going to live forever.
Sure.
And the building will be there far longer than he
But it
is,
would be limited to
presumably.
the office that we discussed. A restaurant couldn't go upstairs or anything
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, they
we
would have to
got-
go ahead.
it's definitely limited to offices, to general offices.
I'm good with that. I have another question. My eyes are, so I'm looking at proposed restaurant A. It looks like there's a second floor on this plan here. Is that a mistake?
No,
No.
that's the turning point. That was always approved with offices above.
And the ordinance actually contemplated that. The ordinance, the way it reads, is that you can have 10,000 square feet of general and professional office plus an additional 4,000 square feet above a restaurant for offices of that restaurant chain. And so that would give you a total of 14,000 square feet of office that's permitted by the ordinance. And the amount of office is a little over 11,000.
So that office space would be specific to that?
Specific to that use, it has to be tied into the restaurant below it.
Okay. And my final question, so the hotel, I was not part of this original decision. Does this have banquet facilities, this hotel?
No.
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 Yeah, I looked at the plans. One of the things I did is went to Ron's office, I got the hotel plan and looked at it, and there's a very small dining area, which really isn't a restaurant.
Gotcha.
And then there's a small conference room. And again, it's not large enough to bring people in from the outside. And I think that was the testimony at the original hearings on this. And I had forgotten about that, or I probably wouldn't have even included that in my report.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we weren't having anything, parties, weddings, et
No,
cetera, et cetera.
no.
That's all the questions I have.
Can I ask another question?
Sure. Go right ahead.
So Jim, how much do you feel like this changes the feel of in that whole complex? Do you think
I don't think it has much of an impact at all on the feel of the complex. The one building is going to be 2 stories instead of 1, but it's towards the center of the site. And I checked, it's 150 feet away from the nearest townhouse unit. It's 127.5 feet away from the property line between this site and the townhouse site. And you do have the major access road going through there also. So I don't think it's going to have an impact on that. I looked at the architecturals. The architecturals I think are attractive. So I really didn't have a problem with that. I would have been upset if the architecturals, if I thought they were overpowering, but they're not. And if it was much closer, say if it was 50 feet away from the townhouses, I think I would be concerned about that too. But you do have 150 feet, so that's half a football field away.
Can I jump on that question? So it looks like we have two-story buildings kind of in this general area?
Yeah, the one 2-story building is fronting on Deal Road, I believe, and the other one is this other 2-story building that's back towards the center of the parcel, much further away from Deal Road.
That's the question? What is that area left of the convenience store? That's a brown, yeah, what is that?
The fueling canopy, this is gonna be a Wawa with gas pumps. If I may, Mr. Weinstein, going to your point, now that this building is actually 2 stories and attractive architecture, it actually provides a little additional screening to the Wawa. Because there's gonna be an additional, 10 to 12 feet of building height there that will screen the townhouses from the Wawa. I imagine it's nicer looking at a second floor office than the roof of the Wawa.
Anyone else from the board have any questions?
That's all we have, Ms. Dr. Da-da-da-da-da.
You can call me Mr. Chair, it's all right. It's okay.
Worked very hard for that degree. I'm not gonna discount it.
It's okay. No, it's all right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we will note for the record that there is no one here from the public.
Yeah.
just,
And the only other comment I would have,
did we make the stipulation? Ms. Krimko threw out the idea of that we would stipulate that these spaces were gonna be allocated, but I don't know if we,
You did not include it. I was not
not
aware.
affirming.
The board needs to decide if that's something they would want to be a
Yes.
stipulation or not.
Not affirming,
Right, so
Mr.
if the
Chairman,
board
re-
votes favorably and they wanted that, they could condition that 5 of those spaces be labeled.
Mr. Chairman, I just did some quick math for that proposed retail, the 3252 square foot retail building. If you take away those 8 spaces at the top there, you still have sufficient parking along the building and along that bank of parking on the right side. That alone is enough for that proposed retail, which requires 17 spaces, and those 2 parking banks would be 20. And you still have some additional parking next to the restaurant A, plus that bank of parking on the other side of the building. So there is sufficient parking if those 8 spaces were dedicated for employee parking, and that's totally up to the board if you want to require that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a parking issue for me. It's really just the fact that, we spent 12, 13 meetings on, perfecting a site plan, and now here we are, we're changing the site plan again. It bothers me. I have to be honest, that's how I feel
I'll
about
just caution
it.
the board, you can't deny it because it bothers you
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah,
back again.
But I can say how
You
I
can
feel.
state your opinion.
Yeah,
I
of
just have to,
course,
I'm
I
just
just say my
cautious, I'm
opinion.
just
That's
cautioning
all.
the board, you
And
can't
Dr.
deny for that reason.
Dr. DiMatteo, one thing I'd like to just add to that.
Go ahead, go
Because
ahead.
it's important for clarification. I know that this application put the board members that were here for it through hell. Nobody wanted to sit through that many hearings, but I will tell you that 11 of those 12 hearings were because of the objectors and the baseless objections that they had and the baseless things that they presented. The perfection of this site plan was perfected pursuant to the ordinance and what was required to it. There were 3 years leading up to that to get this site plan to fit exactly within that ordinance. So maybe it would have taken 2 to hear the board's concerns, to make some changes and come back, but to say that we took 12 hearings to perfect this, 10 of those 12 hearings were the public comment.
I disagree. I was there for every single one of them. We changed the project several times. I would not say 2 hearings.
Yeah.
I think that's really, you're minimizing the time that we spent on this project. And I do not like that. I will have to say, again, that's my opinion. But I do not like that. Do
I'm
not
not
say that,
minimizing,
please.
I'm not minimizing the time. What I'm saying is, it's not fair to say that it took 12 hearings to
But it
craft
did.
what we got to.
It did. It took 12 hearings.
If I may, when you have a 30-acre parcel like this, we have a lot of developments this size. It's very rare that you get a site plan approval and then build exactly what was approved, because you don't have all your users picked, you don't have leases signed. On a development this size that took 12 or 13 hearings, to get this close and to build as close as we are is pretty rare. This was approved for a bank with drive-throughs, building the building down there, 3200.
Yeah,
We
I'm
took the
aware.
drive-throughs away.
I understand.
So there's constant changes. So my guess is we may be back here one more time. I hope not, but you never know.
All right, so again, I'm just going to make clear for the
I'm
record.
responding.
I hope not. I hope
I
not.
didn't respond to that.
At this point, we have most of the leases signed.
I'm going to have, I just want to state for the record so that the record is very clear to protect the record. You can't deny this application because you're annoyed at the applicant. They're trying to maximize or you're annoyed, they're trying to maximize the site, or that you think they're going to keep coming back or whatever. You only can deny the application if you find that the site plan that they're proposing today doesn't work as they're proposing it. That has to be the basis if you choose to deny the application. So I'm just protecting the record and making sure that's in the record.
Chairman,
And
can
just,
another
I
question?
can advise the board too, that I've been doing this for over 40 years, and many of the applications that I have testified on the other side in other communities, I have been in numerous times to change the approvals, because conditions change, the type of uses that the applicant, the owner can draw to the site changes. I have one in Old Bridge right now that was approved 4 years ago, and we're going in for the 4th change already on that. And it just, sometimes the economics drives the changes. It's not what an applicant is envisioning something here because he wants to get here, he's envisioning this, and all of a sudden, he finds out he's over here. So he has to go back to get approvals changed.
We didn't close the hearing yet. Go ahead. You're sure?
I'm following Robert's
Do you
rules
have
of
any
order.
more? Do you wanna-
I'm just assuming that there's no signage thing that's been left out here, right on the, that when we come back to it, we're gonna, there's no one's a big sign on it or something like that.
Where, you mean a pylon, or you mean on the building?
On the building,
No, we don't need signage on the building. For the office, you mean?
yes.
We don't need it.
Okay, great.
I just have one more question too. Do we comply with all ADA stuff, handicap spots? Does this change anything because we're building up, vertically? Does this change the dynamics of handicap accessibility, all that sort of thing?
From a parking and site accessibility standpoint, no, nothing else changes. The building itself, I'm not the architect, but the building will have an elevator to the second floor. That is an addition to make it ADA accessible.
We're all good on that?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it doesn't change the count of required ADAs?
No, the count of required ADA's spaces doesn't, it doesn't matter the size of the building. It matters the number of parking spaces around it. So whatever the size of the building, the number of parking spaces that are in the area dictate how many ADA spaces you have.
Okay.
I didn't know that. Okay. You're good? Okay. So we close the hearing? Can I get a motion to close the hearing?
I move we close the hearing.
A second? Can we have a roll call for
Do
that?
that all in favor. You don't need a roll call for that.
Oh, I'd like Amy to have some part in the meeting
She's
too.
gonna be able to take another roll in a minute, but you don't need to do a roll call to close the meeting.
Are we good with closing the meeting? Okay. Everybody's nodding their head.
Yes, that's an
your,
aye.
you're okay with that, Mr. Lexington?
I am fine with that.
Okay.
I'm all about expediency.
Does anyone want to make a motion for this project?
I move to approve the project.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, can I ask, is that with the condition for those locked-in spaces or assigned spaces or not?
I would like to not require that. I'd like to give them some flexibility for the future. I think that I think there's more than enough parking on the site for what they're proposing for the office space. I don't think it's going to be an issue, and I think putting the signing up and blocking them off is, I don't think we need to do it.
I agree with you.
However,
I agree.
However, he's not gonna be, we're just saying, he's not gonna, no, he's making.
Yeah,
I can
we're
make-
deliberating.
I can make a comment on it, right? Right, this is Robert's Rules of Order, you made a motion, comment on it, right? However, he's not gonna live there forever, so we're not gonna sure how many actual people are gonna be there coming down the road, right? So if that turns into a space that could house 25, 30 people.
Can I make a suggestion on
Yeah,
that point?
sure.
And I'm sure Ms. Krimko would probably say yes. Could a condition of the resolution, could a condition of the resolution be that if the town zoning officer or traffic safety officer determines at some point in the future there is a problem at the site, that the applicant will agree to designate those spaces, and we can mark those spaces on the site plan as potentially, whatever the phrasing I'll do.
Green banked.
Yeah, green banked
Green-banked employee
employee
parking.
parking.
Well, I wouldn't say green bank.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, yes.
we know what
The
you mean,
gray,
yeah.
gray banked employee
Right,
parking.
right back. So there'll be parking spaces, but they won't be, if they're not necessary now, they don't have to do it. If at some point the town decides that they do need to do it, then they would have to. And you can do that as a compromise between the two. Or you can just have them do it now, whatever you want to do.
I'm good with the compromise, Jeff. How are you?
Jeff, you okay? You're sure?
Okay with the compromise, yeah. Okay with the compromise.
All right.
Just
It's-
five, just five.
It's just 5 of them, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
those 5 spaces. Okay. And that will be designated on the site plan as gray banked. I like that phrase.
Yes.
Is that the real
Yeah,
phrase?
yeah.
Is that
No, but.
We made that up.
Yep,
parking lot.
off the cuff.
So we had a motion, we had a second with that provision, if I understood correctly. So now would be your turn to shine.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Make a motion to close the hearing. I mean, the meeting,
Adjourn.
to adjourn the meeting.
That can be an all in favor
We
also.
all in favor? We're all good with that?
Now you wake up. Second, I'm out.
Hey,
So the best for last.